Hey kiddos, we're going to look at South Asia and then also look at the Middle East or Southwest Asia as well. So we have two short little PowerPoints that we're going to go over, and then you have a 15 question comprehension check that you're going to take after this. It's linked directly below. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Here we go. So if we're looking at South Asia, we're looking at this region here: Pakistan, India, Bhutan, Nepal, all of those. The mountain ranges that are in there. The Himalayas is a major mountain range. It's more than 1,500 miles long and hundreds of miles wide. Mount Everest, or the world's highest peak, is in this mountain range, and its peak is at 29,000 feet. But there's nearly 24 peaks, each rising around 24,000 feet or above. So not only is this mountain range long, and you can see it's outlined here, but it's one of the highest, largest mountain ranges in the world. So here's a picture of Mount Everest. You can see very tall. The air gets super thin at the top, so if you're trying to climb it, and here's some pictures of it, there's intense climbing that you have to do to be able to get there. You have to be able to breathe well. You have to be like medically certified. Or you might even have to take oxygen with you if you're trying to get up to the top of Mount Everest. Then there's also the Karakoram Mountains. Along with the Himalayas, they create a barrier between the Indian subcontinent and the rest of Asia. So we're thinking, here's the Himalaya through this area. And the rest go as well. So here's the Karakoram. This is also the home to the second highest peak in the world, or K2. Then there's the Vindhya Mountains, which are in central India. And then the Eastern Ghats and the Western Ghats, which form the plateau right through here. And you can see Western Ghats, Eastern Ghats form a plateau right through here. And this makes up the physical geography of India. So there's K2. More pictures for you. Then looking at the river systems. Rivers play a key role in supporting the life in South Asia. There's three specific river systems. The Indus flows through Pakistan and empties into the Arabian Sea. And you can see right here that river. The Brahmaputra is a system of rivers, and then the Ganges is a system of rivers. These two flow east and eventually join to form the broad delta along the Bay of Bengal. So you can see all of these different river systems. Honestly, you can see India has a lot of rivers that make up the country. They're all over the place. So the Brahmaputra through here, the Ganges is coming through here, and this is what it's talking about. It makes up the delta that dumps into the Bay of Bengal right through here. Just some pictures for you to go through. The Ganges River, though, specifically, has religious significance for the Hindu people, the Hindu religion. It provides water for drinking, farming, and transportation. It's of spiritual significance. According to Hindu beliefs, the Ganges brings life to people. They worship the river as a goddess, and they believe the water has healing powers. In some places, wide stone steps lead down into the river, and pilgrims come from all over the world to drink and bathe in its water. They will also scatter ashes of their deceased family members into the water. However, looking at it, is also one of the most polluted rivers in the world. Millions of gallons of raw sewage and waste flow into this river every single day. Bodies of dead animals and even human corpses can be seen floating in the water. So there's a lot of chemicals and deadly bacteria that's in this water that they're still going in to bathe and to do all of this. The thousands who bathe or drink become ill with hepatitis, typhoid, or cholera. And then in 1986, the government tried to restore the health of the river, but because it's such a large industrialized country and there's so many people that live in India, it's hard for them to really do this. Many Hindus believe that the water is too holy to be harmed by pollution. So here's some more pictures of the Ganges River. There's some of these stone steps that are there for people to bathe in. More people. Then looking at monsoons. Monsoons are seasonal winds. These rain patterns that come in and affect a region for a long period of time. Seasonal winds greatly affect the climate of South Asia. In October through May, the winter winds blow from the north and northeast and are dry. As summer nears, the temps gradually rise, so the heated air also rises, which, when you're looking at wind patterns, adjusts how the wind is flowing. So specifically, if you're ever watching the weather, a weatherman or the Weather Channel, and you're seeing high and low air patterns, that's what they're trying to chart out for you to see. So it does bring a lot of rain to the area, but that people use in a lot of different ways. But then also with a lot of rain comes a lot of flooding. And this is a problem that they have to deal with frequently. So between June to September, winds blow from the Indian Ocean in the south and southwest, carrying warm, moist air. Then heavy rains provide the region with the largest portion of its yearly precipitation. Rainfall is heaviest in the eastern part. Some spots receive at least 450 inches on average of rain a year. So they're getting a lot of rain, and this is showing those wind patterns, how they're switching directions from summer to winter. The rainfall is crucial to the millions that live in the region. So when we are looking at all those rivers, they have a lot of rivers, and a lot of the water is able to flow off. If you remember, there's mountain ranges, and we've talked about that. So on the other side of those mountains, there's desert, but then all of this area is rain. It has plentiful of water. Looking at the population, and these numbers are a little old, so they are much higher than the current numbers would be much higher than what's on this screen. There's approximately 1.5 billion people who live in South Asia. The population density is at this time was 760 per square mile. That's 7 times the world average. So if this rate of growth continues, which it has been growing rapidly, the population could double in 40 years. India is half the size of the continental U.S. with more than 1.1 billion people. For reference, the United States only has around 320 million. So it is much larger in the amount of people than population, but about half the size of the continental U.S. Bangladesh has 2,454 people per square mile. And I do want you to think about that in the context of this disease that's spreading. There's not a lot of room for people to be able to get away from other people like there is in our country. I mean, we have people that live in the rural parts. They have a lot of people that live in the rural parts too, but it's becoming much more urbanized as well. A strong percentage of South Asians living in urban areas is relatively low. Only about 15 to 30% live in urban areas, but that number is growing. It's becoming more and more urbanized. Many are going to the urban areas in search of better jobs and higher wages. So when more and more people come to cities, and we've talked about this some with Latin America, cities become overcrowded. You don't have places where you can put people. Public facilities such as schools, hospitals, roadways. We look at sewage systems. All of these public utilities that we have become overrun with the amount of people that are using them because they're not built for that amount. The largest cities in South Asia are Calcutta in India, Mumbai, Delhi, Dhaka, and Islamabad in Pakistan. So here's a picture from Calcutta, Mumbai, Delhi, Dhaka, and Islamabad. So switching into a little bit more of Hindu belief. According to Hindu, each person is born into a caste and has a certain moral duty known as a dharma that is specific to that caste. And you can see the different castes moving up in level here. While the system brought social order, it also caused discrimination and limited people's ability to improve their lot in life. There's not a lot of social mobility. You're born into a caste and then you stay in that caste. Hinduism grew out of Aryan culture and incorporated the caste system. It's a polytheistic religion, which means they have many gods and goddesses. It's a way of life and a set of beliefs. Every individual must live according to his or her own dharma, or their moral duty. All good actions are rewarded and bad are punished. This is the law of karma. Samsara, or reincarnation, people are reborn repeatedly until they have overcome all of their weaknesses and earthly desires. At that point, they are released from the cycle of rebirth and reach moksha, which is a state of changeless bliss. Hinduism also sees all of the world's religions as the path towards the same goal, making everyone a better person over time. Here's one of the Hindu temples in Delhi, India, if I can speak. And then also looking at religion through Buddhism. Approximately 563 BC in the present-day Nepal, a prince was born, Siddhartha Gautama. He had everything he could want, but because of his awareness of human suffering, he went on a pilgrimage. After years of spiritual searching and meditations, he perceived the true nature of human existence for the first time, and he became known as Buddha, or the Awakened One. Buddha spent the rest of his life trying to teach people they are suffering because they are overly attached to material things. To escape the chain of desire and suffering, which leads to endless rebirth, one must live by certain rules. So it's not that doesn't have specific religious rituals. It's a way of living. By following Buddha's guidelines, people could enter a state of great insight, calm, and happiness called nirvana. And I do want to draw the comparison between these two images of Buddha. So this is one that's frequently seen in modern cultures. This is another image. You can notice there's a large difference between how he's being perceived. For reference, one of the things that Buddha is known for was eating a grain of rice a day. So you're not going to look like this if you're eating a grain of rice a day. However, in ancient Asian cultures, weight was a sign of wealth or prestige. So he's frequently depicted this way because of those ancient cultures. But this is another way that people frequently see him as well. Looking at their governments, there's several different types of governments throughout the region. There's democracies, monarchies. In India, they have a federal parliamentary republic. In Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, they have parliamentary systems. The Pakistan has a president. And then in Bhutan and Nepal, they have constitutional monarchs. So there's variety. You can see the whole region. They have different types of government as well. Looking at the struggling economies, there's large, rapidly growing populations. Half of the people of India live in poverty. Looking at Bangladesh, one of the poorest countries in the world, most rely on subsistence farming, which means they only produce enough for themselves to be able to get by. They struggle to grow crops to feed their families. There's a lot that goes into it, but these are very poor regions. All right, so moving into Southwest Asia or the Middle East is what most people frequently know it by. So, one of the major physical features in the Middle East is the Dead Sea. It's a landlocked saltwater lake. It's the lowest place on the Earth's surface at 1,300 feet below sea level, and it's 9 times saltier than the ocean. Um, so, think about what that means. If we're looking from a chemistry, when you put more salt into something, um, it makes things be able to float really well in it. So people float really well. Items float really well. Things have less weight in the Dead Sea. So, looking at the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, you should have learned a lot about these two rivers in seventh grade. Specifically, when you're looking at Sumerian civilization, it's one of really the birthplace of societies. The Fertile Crescent, all that was going into these societies, the fact that these rivers merge there, and I'll show you a better picture on this next slide, makes this land very fertile throughout this region. So it allows people to be able to settle down and form civilizations. So the Sumerian civilization, like I said, was one of the first major civilizations to develop. They were also able to develop first forms of writing during the time period. It originates in the mountains of these rivers originate in the mountains of eastern Turkey and flow southeast through Syria and Iraq. The area believed to be the first place to practice the domestication of plants and animals. So that's what I'm talking about, is because they have this water source there, they have fertile land. People realize that we don't need to move around constantly. We don't need to follow animals. We can have animals domesticated. We can use crops, and we can have society and grow here together. And that's really, these rivers began that movement. Here's an actual picture of the rivers. Here's the Euphrates River. One of the things that the Middle East is known for is oil, and half of the world's oil reserves are found in the region. All right, so I did go and access a different PowerPoint, so you could get this information. Looking back at oil, though, this is one of the most important natural resources, specifically after water, in the region. Half of the world's oil reserves are found in the region. The region produces about 30% of the world's oil supply. Saudi Arabia is one of the largest producers of crude oil in the world. And crude oil is an important point. Oil that comes from this region cannot just be put into your car and then used for what it needs to happen. Oil has to be refined, and the United States is the largest place to get oil refined. It's one of the only effective places that people can get oil refined cheaply. In recent years, our country has moved to where we require less and less foreign oil, and we produce it ourselves and then refine it ourselves. But when we look at econ in the fall, think about the supply and demand markets. When oil shifts in this region, it shifts the prices across the globe. And that does affect oil producers as well. And right now, and we're going to talk about OPEC in just a second, but keep in mind that this is the region that's controlling a lot of it. And it does go up here into Russia. So Russia has a lot of oil. I'm going to go back, I'm sorry. So Russia does have a lot of oil. They run into conflict sometimes with all of this oil that's down here in these other regions, in Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Turkey. But the United States does produce oil for ourselves as well. The region grew into global importance as oil became more important globally, especially in the boom of industrialization when oil became more and more needed. Western powers, and we're talking about European, United States, others, started needing, wanting more influence in the region. So some of the region was colonized. Others, the United States or Britain, would go in and take over the oil industries in certain countries. If we think about British Petroleum, it started in Iran. Or it got a lot of its money from Iran. It's one of the reasons that Iran doesn't like the Western culture still to this day. But then in the 1960s, this region formed a group called OPEC, which is the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, as a way to advocate for themselves and control oil prices. That way, there's some stability to oil across the world, because it is so important to the whole world's global economy. Now, thinking about that as well, if we look back at these countries, I was telling you about Russia and Russia and Saudi Arabia. So Russia started producing oil. They can produce it very cheaply, and so can Saudi Arabia. They had an agreement that fell out of terms, and this is the reason that oil is so cheap right now in our country. Honestly, oil has a negative value right now. They are paying people to buy oil from them. So think about that for a second. They're producing so much oil that they're paying someone to keep it for them. That's something that the United States can't compete with. Our oil industry has to have at around $20, $30 a barrel for it to be successful. And right now they have a negative $20 on it. They're paying people to take the oil off their hands. So they've run the prices so cheap that it's hurting the rest of the industries. And this is something that Trump has been very involved in, trying to negotiate a settlement for the problem there. So here's an oil field in Kuwait. Then looking at deserts, and I think that this is something that most of you probably already identify with the Middle East. Deserts cover about 50% of the region. Lebanon, Cyprus, Turkey are the only countries without a desert. But this doesn't mean that deserts make up all of the country. There's lush areas. There's snow-covered mountains in some. There is more than just desert, but it does make up a large part of their physical geography. Deserts in this region have limited sand dunes. More extensive are rock gravel areas called desert pavement, mountains, and exposed barren rock. The desert areas, which is logical, are largely unpopulated. There are some cities where oil-related industries provide jobs, and a lot of their public services, public amenities, waters have to be brought into it. The nomadic herders or Bedouins who move from place to place in the desert live in or near desert oases. So they move as they need the water or following specific herds, land, all of that. There's an empty quarter of Saudi Arabia. A quarter of the land area of the peninsula is empty. The largest area of sand in the region, it's about the size of Texas. Sand dunes are as high as 800 feet. There's could be as much as 10 years may pass without rain in this part of the world. So some more deserts. Looking at population. Most populated countries are Turkey and Iran. Each has more than 60 million people. Bahrain is the most densely populated with 2,400 people per square mile. The population totals at about 263 million. The major languages: Arabic, Hebrew, Turkish, Greek, Pashto, Farsi. All of those. Arabic is the most commonly spoken language, though. It's the one that kind of unites most of them. And then looking at religion, Islam developed in Arabia around 600 CE. It's a monotheistic religion that is based on the teachings of its founder, Muhammad. The two main branches, and there's several that branch out as well, are Sunni and Shiite. Sunni, about 90% of the world is Sunni. Shiite makes up about 10%, and then there's some other that fall from that as well. Or, I'm sorry, it's 20% are about Shiite. The majority are Sunni Muslims, though. Another small minority branch is Sufism or Sufism. It's a more mystic aspect of Islam, which means there's more. It's a different type than Sunni. They have different cult customs, different beliefs. They still believe in Muhammad, but they have different ideas about how it's to be practiced, their religion. So Islam spread between 650 to 900 through a vast empire from Pakistan to North Africa and Spain. There's two holy cities, Mecca and Medina, based on where Muhammad settled, what cities he ruled during his time. Mecca is the holy city that people make pilgrimages to, and Medina is one that they go to as well. But Mecca is the one where you see people walking in a circle around the rock. So the majority of Muslims speak Arabic, like I said, except in Turkey and Iran. The followers are called Muslims. So if you practice Islam, you're a Muslim. The Quran is the holy book of the Muslims. The Quran is believed to be a record of the word of Allah as it is revealed to his prophet Muhammad. Muslims believe that it is a sin if the Quran is read in any language other than Arabic. So the Quran outlines 5 pillars, or the basic duties of a Muslim. They have to pray 5 times daily facing Mecca. They have to do a payment of alms, or 1/40th of one's wealth. They have to fast from sunrise to sunset during the holy month of Ramadan, which is the 9th month of the Islamic year. They make a pilgrimage or a Hajj to Mecca if they're able. And then they have to state the belief that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. So all of these make up the 5 pillars of Islam, or what's the 5 parts of the religion. Here is the picture that I was telling you about in Mecca of people circulating around the Shabbat. Here's the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. So Islam isn't the only religion that's got its basis in the Middle East. Judaism is the religion of people known as the Hebrews. Hebrews lived along the eastern shore of the Mediterranean Sea. It established the kingdom of Judah and Israel around 1000 BCE. And there's 5 holy books, together known as the Torah. They recorded the early history of the Hebrews and their religion. So the Western Wall, also called the Wailing Wall, is the holiest site in Jerusalem for Jews. It's a portion of the Second Temple, which was constructed after the Jews returned to their homeland in 538 BC. It is the only remaining piece of the Second Temple, which was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. Here's another picture of the wall. Another religion that gets its basis in the Middle East is Christianity. This religion developed around 30 CE in the same region as Judaism, or known as Palestine. This religion is based on the teachings of Jesus, a Jew who traveled through Palestine spreading his beliefs. Jesus was threatening to some people. He did not threaten people. He was threatening to some people as he was tried and crucified in Jerusalem. Followers are called Christians. The Bible is the holy book of the Christians. Jerusalem is considered by Christians to be a holy city, sacred location of the final suffering and crucifixion of Jesus Christ. As you're looking at the Middle East, it's not only just Jerusalem that's a holy, Bethlehem, all of those different parts that make up the Christianity beliefs are all located in this region. So here's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, if I can speak, built on the site that includes both Golgotha or Calvary, where Jesus was crucified, and the tomb where he was buried. Here's the tomb of the Christ in the church. So Israeli Jews trace roots to the Hebrews who settled the region in ancient times and believed God had given them the land as a permanent home. Over time, wars and persecutions drove many of the Jews out of the area. Israel was founded as a Jewish homeland in 1948. This is something that happened after the Holocaust, and the world decided that Jews deserved and needed a homeland. So they founded Israel, but the problem is that that land was already occupied. So Arabs of the region did not want a Jewish state on their territory, and they had, which had been their homeland also for centuries. So conflict has broken out in the region, and that conflict still exists today. This is a significant conflict because we are very close allies with Israel. So when Israel gets pulled into conflict, we come in and help them. We give them a lot of military weapons to help them in their conflict. So this is something that is very important to our culture. So that wraps up. That wraps up this lesson. I will tell you though, the comprehension check can be taken as many times as you need to get whatever score you want to get. Let me know if you have any questions, and I hope you all have a great week.